Hi, my name's Ashley, and I want to talk about my current ongoing experience in my Ketu Mahadasha. So, my main reason I want to just sort of kind of like express and discuss my current experience in this Ketu Mahadasha. Hopefully, it can maybe help someone else going through this time as well. I know that before I even entered into my Ketu Mahadasha, I was actually looking at videos of other people talking about their experience. So I figured I'll just join the club. So let's get going. Okay, so let's see. Just to give like a little bit of background, my K2 is in the third house in Leo in the Uttara Falguni nakshatra. I officially entered into my K2 Mahadasha July 21st of 2022. At first going into the Mahadasha, actually even before entering into this Mahadasha, like towards the very end, the last Antahadasha of my Mercury, which also, side note, forgive me if I am pronouncing these terms incorrectly. Just please don't go after me, but I'm doing my best. Anyway, the last Antahadasha of my Mercury um, Mahadasha period, it got pretty intense. It was probably it was in like the middle or kind of towards the end of the pandemic for one, and I was currently in a state of moving to come back home because my mother, she had gotten diagnosed with lung cancer, which I just thought, oh, wow. Like already I just started to feel like this sense of change. So I don't know if anyone else had like a similar kind of experience in terms of even before entering into the Ketu Mahadasha that there was sort of already shifts starting to begin to happen. But for me, um, I can say that I had already start to feel this sense of change and shift kind of coming into my life. So, kind of fast forward, or just a little bit like a background from what my understanding of K2 has been and what I've learned. I've like listened and read certain texts and lectures from different astrologers, Vedic astrologers, talk about how K2 is sort of like the flag. We like set the flag that we've already completed, whatever this was in like a past life. So when I began to make arrangements, I was like living in Portland, Oregon at the time, and my mother and family, they live in California. So when I was making arrangements to move back to California, my roommates and myself, part of me felt a sense of excitement because I had kind of been sort of like desiring to sort of just get back home. I had missed my family. I missed my mother especially. And so I just thought, okay, well, and also too, there was very little information thus far with my mother's diagnosis, cancer diagnosis. So there was like a lot of kind of hope for me. So kind of with that feeling like that K2 is sort of like your past life in a sense, I sort of felt the same sense like, well, I'm going back home. At the time, I didn't put this together, but I'm just saying that at the time, the idea of coming back home, back to my, my hometown, and to be with like my family again, closer to my family and my mother, it was kind of like, well, you know what, that feels really great. I can't wait for this to happen because then I can maybe catch up with maybe like old friends, cousins, aunts, uncles, that sort of thing. Okay, so that is the opposite of what happened. um, Once my K2 Mahadasha went in full effect, once the date had passed and occurred, everything you it was like night and day, sort of, especially from like an emotional standpoint. I knew something. It's just, this just wasn't the same. The people that I was excited to see, um, it was interesting because everything surrounding it just wasn't what I was anticipating for it to be. So I'm not saying that, oh, these people are awful. No, nothing like that. It was just more like, this just isn't this isn't the same. Yet it is the same, right? I'm back here in my old home, my old house, stomping grounds, and trying to kind of manufacture this whole feeling of camaraderie with old friends and people, but they had all changed like significantly. A lot of like friends had either gotten married, for instance, or they had children, so like priorities were different. And we just were not like on the same wavelength. But yet here I am, sort of back in this old world of mine. Moving on from that too, is just my mother's diagnosis. What we were hoping was, in terms of like stage 0 of her cancer, come to find out she was already, I believe, like at stage 4. They had given her about a year and some change to live. She was still, though, in pretty good spirits. I first like arrived and came in, and it just seemed like, what though, like, we beat the odds before, we can beat the odds again. I still really held on to a strong sense of hope. Unfortunately, she just progressively, sadly, just got worse and worse as time went on. The caregiving that my aunt and myself were providing, because my aunt was also living in my mother's home at the time, it just it was becoming more so nonstop. A lot of things that were simple for my mother to do, like even feeding herself and whatnot, it just got to a point where the cancer unfortunately metastasized to her brain, and she couldn't even lift her hands to do that anymore. So we were taking care of her nonstop, and there was just so much. It was just so much heaviness going on. My relationship with my aunt, who in the earlier days of my upbringing as a kid, it just became more and more strained, and more so to the fact because I wasn't the same person, and I think that she was hoping that on some level that I was the same person, because as much as I do love my aunt, I do love her very much. I love my family. It's just interesting because I've been completely cut off in a way from them. I saw things in some of these people that I was sort of blind to, I guess you can say, before I left and moved to Portland 8 years prior. And really, from my observations and just personal research, because I'm not like a therapist or a psychiatrist by any means of the word, but I came to the conclusion that this person really is pretty much, it's like a borderline covert narcissist. She did many things that, regardless if she was conscious of it or not, that just really worked to undermine my relationship with my mother at the time. And very manipulative person. And it's just because I was at one point before in my earlier life, you can say, I had little to no boundaries. I was a huge people pleaser, and it's just like I had really low sense of myself. But moving through this period, and then kind of through my own personal development while I was away, I guess you can say, in Portland, like I kind of grew up more of a backbone. And I think that was one thing that my family wasn't used to seeing me as, someone who's going to advocate for themselves and who's not going to just take BS just because you said something. And I think that's part of the reason why our dynamic worked when I was younger, because it was just like I hung on every single word that she would say. And like, granted, though, she's a very intelligent woman, and she uh she knows how to you know navigate situations and things of that sort. But at the same time, overall, I just picked up on the sense that, like, you continuously try to manipulate me. You do these passive aggressive type, like, little, like, attacks and nitpicking and nagging, and talking to her or trying to have a conversation to her, or even trying to, like, express certain needs or express a boundary, it always resulted in a bigger blow up than was necessary. I always kind of fell to this whole victim sort of, just like, well, I just can't do anything right, I guess, and blah 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 blah. And it was just exhausting. So that was exhausting, on top of taking care of my mother, who was pretty much like, she's like the light of my life. I love that woman. That woman has given me everything, and I really don't take that for granted, not one little bit. She was just such an amazing, beautiful person. So it was just sort of like, I was in the midst of, like, watching this strong, vibrant person that was my mother, just her light was just dimming, just such at a rapid pace, for one. Then two, I'm, like, also on the other side of it, sort of grieving the relationship, or the lack thereof relationship, of my aunt and myself, because you know uh it's just like, I just can't um do or unsee what I saw. Like, I feel like her mask, sort of, in a sense, came off, and there was just no coming back for me from that, in the sense, I just can't not have boundaries anymore. I just can't not say, like, you know what, like, I smell bullshit on this, and it's just, I just could not physically, emotionally, mentally do it anymore. And my bandwidth was just running thin. Um, on top of that, because I noticed, like, for me, like, me, before entering into the Ketu Mahadasha, like, a lot of the common threads and things that I would see is just like, that people were most afraid of, was like losing, like, financial, I don't want to say just wealth, but, like, just like financial stability, I guess. K2 is, from my understanding, it's a very spiritual, it's not a graha, but this point, of the moon, in a sense. It's moksha. It's not focused. Its focus is not on this material world, I guess. So I guess many people's common experience, maybe with K2, has been like, sometimes they've lost their jobs, or they've, like, they really ran on hard times, financially speaking. So that was probably one of my biggest fears going into the Ketu Mahadasha, because, like I said, we were just sort of kind of in the middle to, like, tail end of the pandemic, for one. I did get laid off, but thankfully, I had qualified for unemployment, and that helped keep me going at, like, a nice steady pace. I also was in the process, my Mercury Mahadasha, right, of kind of creating and developing, like, my own business, like, of, like, services, consulting services, like life coaching. I was creating courses. I actually work with beta clients, and then for a small nominal fee, I actually started working with some groups and different people, and kind of getting a little bit of pay for it. Like, but it was more so for my training than it was really me going full out in my business. But I was steadily moving along that trajectory, and I'm like, okay, great. Like, I'm building a business, my services, so my fear before entering into the Ketu Mahadasha at that time was, oh my goodness, like, I'm going to be stripped. But I guess when I also look at my chart now, because I can only look so much before it's just like sometimes you can't really see when you're like in it. But like sometimes and so I try not to like look at my chart. Maybe I'll ask like I'll pay like an astrologer to kind of look at it. But from my understanding and what the pieces that I've connected, I wealth was not the issue, and it was more of like I think my material anchor in this world was my mother. She helped me navigate this world. Like I said, she gave me everything. My family, I think in general, like my close core family. So with that, so far, 2 to 3 years into this Mahadasha, I my brother passed away from a drug overdose, unfortunately. And then shortly after that, my older sister passed away, completely unrelated to due to complications when she entered the ER. The doctor apparently didn't do their due diligence, maybe because it was, I don't know, like an emergency type situation. They gave her a medication that was in conflict with something else in terms of her medication, and it gave her a heart attack, and unfortunately she died. And then shortly right after that, my mother died. So this all happened in less than 100 days apart from each other. My brother died October 9th, today actually, as I record this video. My older sister, died in January, and then my mother joined them in February, unfortunately. So I would say that that was probably, it was life-shattering, to say in the least. And it sort of, for me, after that point, it was such a huge blow. So devastating. It just knocked me off of my feet. And for a while, up until probably the last few months, actually up until the last month, what am I saying, few months, I have felt like a headless person. I've been so, I guess you can say, disassociated. Ironically enough, however, though, the one thing that I feared of happening, of being penniless, of losing jobs, losing money, the exact opposite happened, actually. After my mother passed away, and then my brother and sister passed away, I was in line to inherit my family's fortune. Small fortune, but a fortune nonetheless, which my grandmother, God rest her soul, she had passed away to my grandparents, but she was the vice president of the Caterpillar construction company. So my family has been pretty well off, in the sense we're more on the upper echelon of the upper middle class. Nothing like Rothschilds or anything like that nature, but definitely not needing for a lot. However, it also ended up causing more trouble, I guess you can say, in my family life. I feel like my third house kind of area. More so to do with the fact that with inheritances, even if things are perfectly laid out, things can still get a little bit tricky. And my niece, who I love very, very much, there was something funny with her portion of the inheritance that has now been resolved, thankfully, for the most part, and stuff. But before that, like it was like a year before this mistake was actually caught. So after that, the damage has already been done, which it just continued to cause more of a wedge in my family. between me, my sister-in-law, myself. I still talk to my niece, but it's just not the same. Which brings me kind of to my next point with this whole Mahadasha of Ketu, that it just feels, it's interesting because it just feels like the color kind of in my life has just sort of drained. The thing that, like, for instance, when I initially was looking forward to moving back home, to be with my family, to be closer to my mom, I feel, in a sense, for my lesson in this time period was stripped away from me, because I think K2 is just like, I need you to see beyond this. This is your material world. Like, this is kind of, I don't want to like say anchor so much as it's what's keeping you stuck in so many ways. Not to say that my family kept me like stuck, but spiritually speaking, I guess it was sort of, it was, it created a block for me in some odd way, if that makes sense. I don't know how to really kind of put words to it or explain it, because my mother, she was my link also. She was like a spiritual guru for me. I learned so many things from her. I've learned, she taught me so much. She actually linked me to the spiritual practices that I do now during this period. But more on that later. I will say one thing that I got into that I do not recommend. I don't know. It could be different for you, but this was for me. I got into like edibles, like cannabis edibles, just because I don't know. I just didn't like. I was trying to deal, but I just, at sometimes grief would just hit me so hard, and I just didn't know how to really put that to words to like the people in my life, like my friends and stuff that are here with me, that have been a great support, but also too, I just felt like my own personal emotional stuff was just so heavy, and I don't think I was prepared. Still kind of not really, like I like when I present myself, I guess, to public, I kind of present myself more aloof. Like, I'm very peppy, and like you see, like I probably do still like kind of wear a mask to like a degree, just cuz maybe that old people pleaser inside me, I just don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, but I don't know. I really I had been suffering. Um Suffering a lot, and I isolated myself, which, funny enough, if you look at my chart, my moon is actually isolated between Ketu and Rahu. But so yeah, I would just sort of kind of self isolate. I did edibles, I did like cannabis oils. I just kind of wanted to escape. I think I was kind of going after the moksha in a way that it just didn't work. But it was just something at the time that like I did. But thankfully enough, I kicked it. I kicked the edibles and type habit, because it just wasn't doing me any favors at the time, and it just made me feel a lot more like as if I were drifting. And I went back to my spiritual practices finally again. And ever since I have come back to actually my spiritual practice, like making time to do like character building, plugging in to the divine, listening to my gurus, doing my meditations, doing my sadhanas, doing the mantras and chanting, I will say that there's not like the heaviness isn't as heavy so much, and I actually have been able to see more of insight of like gain more insights from my situation. Like pretty much, for instance, one of those insights just being like my family for one. Um, they're not the people that I grew up with. And I feel like part of this time thus far has like just even being back here in my old home has been a way, like Ketu has shown me that. I feel like I am revisiting my past life, like my earlier life, I guess you can say. And it's just interesting because I feel like it's sort of been a lesson in seeing that it's just like, okay, so all the things that you thought that were so important, and that and like the opinions of these people, and just like living in accordance to what they think that you should do. Like I held so much importance. I gave that power to them. It's just I now see that it's just like they're humans, and they're like anyone else for that matter, and they're trying the best that they can with the information and knowledge and the circumstances that they have to deal with. So I mean, it's just like, I think K2 also was sort of saying like you need to stop giving so much power to that, and you need to redirect that and actually pay homage to what is actually giving you that power, the supreme God, the divine supreme God. So as I have, since doing my meditation practices and inner purification practices, have come to the understanding that, okay, wow, yeah, I had not realized how much of myself, like how much I was giving so much of my own power away to these people, to situations, to what they thought of me. And I had also come to the conclusion just the other day that I now really don't care genuinely what people think or say about me anymore. The only person that like I've ever needed, and that whose opinion I've ever truly cared about, was my mother's. And she's an amazing person. And like I said, she's given me everything. And I've also really needed her. I've needed her emotionally. I've needed her for just like my physical well-being, and now that source, that person is no longer with me anymore in the physical, it's kind of shined a light that it's just like, okay, well, now you have to go within, and you have to find those things for yourself. Amongst many other insights that, of course, right now, as I speak into the camera and trying to talk about it, escapes me, but I can say that those have been some of the key takeaways thus far in this journey. So it's just, I think it's just interesting that, like I said, going into Ketu Mahadasha, my initial fears were so surface level and kind of so ego based, like, oh my gosh, like, what about my money and this that, like, and I want to prove to my mom that I could really take care of myself and blah 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 blah. And it's just like, well, like, look who has the last laugh at this point now, because now here I have inherited like this fortune, but my own family doesn't like me anymore. Like, they really don't. I've also come to that conclusion. My mother, she was also like that glue, because like not only was she that light, that vibrant link, she was the glue in this family, at least for me, for my sake. So when I would go to family events, it's because my mother's like, okay, get up, get dressed. We're going over to so-and-so's house. We're going to celebrate this, that, or the other. Are you ready? I didn't initially want to go. I never really initiated that type of stuff. And even when I've tried to now, and I've gone out to eat with certain family members and like my aunts and stuff like that, it's just like, they don't really care to see me. Like, they just don't, it's not, like I said, it's not like I'm trying to demonize them or make them seem like bad people, because they're not. They're great. They really are. But I've just come to the understanding that it's just like, well, you're not really thinking about me. You're thinking about, what you have to do later on this afternoon. You're thinking about blah, 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 blah. Like, I'm pretty much just an afterthought. Like, so the whole feeling of like being seen from like these different people was really, I think, essentially through the lens of my mother. Like, my mother was that, and she connected us in that way. And so now that my core family, my mom, my dad, my grandparents, my brother, my sister, the only person really left that I think who does genuinely like and love me still is my older sibling, my sister, which, funny enough, in my chart, the house of my older sibling, there's Jupiter's actually in it. And yeah, so, and she genuinely checks in on me. She talks to me. She really wants to make sure that I'm okay. I genuinely want to make sure that she's okay, because I'm like, oh, it's just us two at this point now. So just even thinking about it just makes me like kind of get a little teary eyed, because I really love her. And I just okay, it's like, hey, did I learn my lesson? Please don't take anyone else that like I really care about, But yeah, it's been wild, to say in the least. But what I can suggest thus far that has sort of helped me navigate at least this far, because who knows what's gonna happen within the next 4 or 5 years moving forward, is just like really take the time to kind of like to go within, to really shift your focus from the tangible world, the physical world, into the intangible world, the spirit world, because that's pretty much where I am. Like, in the physical world, when I try to like completely immerse myself in it, like I said, like whether it's doing like cannabis oil and edibles, or trying to eat a bunch of like good food, because like, gosh, like that whole period of time with my mother dying, my brother dying, my sister dying, and all that stuff, and my whole family drama, probably gained like 50 pounds. But it's just like that food that I used to find so much Venusian type pleasure in. It's just it's not the same. It's just not the same. And it wasn't until I actually started to really go within, take in the insights, try to learn the lessons, do my spiritual work, and like do service, is when I'm beginning to feel more of like more purposeful, I guess you can say, is one of the words. I don't feel as headless, because I feel like in the physical world you are, and you try to completely stay just in the physical world, yes, you're just gonna feel like a walking headless person. Versus if you really take in the time and the moment to really like learn the lessons, listen to the insights, whatever it is that you do for like getting in touch with that spiritual component that is you, it's just gonna bring you that much more closer to a sense of, I don't want to say pleasure, but I guess you can say that moksha. I'm not saying that I'm an enlightened being. No, not even in the least. But I can definitely say it just feels more tangible. It feels more like I can feel that more, the world, the non-tangible world, the spiritual world, more than I can exist out here in the physical, I guess you can say. So that, in a nutshell, has been my experience thus far. But one gift that I can really thank Ketu for thus far is I don't give an F really about anyone's opinion over me anymore. Like I said, I was a people pleaser. I was a people pleaser to the max. I could care less at this point what other people really have to say about me. Like, I'm not out here trying to hurt people or anything of that matter, but like I used to just put so much power into that. So I think thus far, this at this leg of the race, it has helped me kind of regain that sense of power back for myself. So yes. So for anyone actually going through their Ketu Mahadasha, and you have some insights or things that you'd want to share, I would love to hear it. I love to learn and piece together like more about this time period phenomenon. But yeah, I hope you all take care. And if you got to this far in the video, thank you for listening. And we'll see what happens in the future. All right.